Yeah. Back at it.
Back at it like a good snack habit.
Le- Lego.
Ah.
What we got? You be getting us some interesting
I know
things
but you
lately.
know what, as I start
Not things, topics.
but you know what, the truth is, as I start focusing more on my patriotism, I'll
Oh,
start seeing
okay.
oh, you have something like I can't say words like that.
Patriotism. Don't leave me hanging. When you take your time, of course you can say your words. You can enunciate your words. But when you don't, you be stuttering over them. They know that. They our squad. Those that truly love us, they know what it is, and it's
So
all good.
so as I've been looking through stuff that's been coming up, that's been sparking my interest a lot more because I've opened my learning door.
Okay,
Whereas that door was closed in the past, it's open now.
let's go.
And I saw this pop up, and I always heard about Gaddafi, but I didn't know what Gaddafi was known for. I just knew he was real. He was really a bad dude, but that's all I knew. I didn't know why he was a bad dude. You know, we all knew about Osama bin Laden, and we knew what he was known for, but it wasn't really. I didn't really know what Gaddafi was known for, and I know those are two different countries where they were. But I'm curious to know what Gaddafi was known for.
I I feel like I remember him being like a dictator. For some reason, I thought he was in like drug lord as well, but I didn't get a chance to review and read that far down. But I know I just don't remember him being a good guy. So dictatorship is kind of like what I remember. Corrupt. I don't think he was all the way right when it came to leading. And they talked about him being a socialist.
What's the definition of a socialist?
Well, they talked about how they socialism deals with a thought, an ideology of wanting people to rely on the government for um, reliance.
Oh, for everything.
Yeah,
Really?
they wanted it to be a government funded type of thing. That's what it said.
As I noticed, the more our government dips into stuff they shouldn't dip into, it makes things go weird. You know, I don't think it's certain things that the government should be dipping into. Period. Like, did you know? As like Christians, we're not necessarily supposed to be adhering completely to what the government says. Did you know that?
Mm-mm.
No.
A theory or system of social organization that advocates the ownership and control of the means of production and distribution, capital, land, by the community as a whole, usually through a centralized government. So the
Mm.
government is the one that's supplying
So really,
distribution, capital, land. To me, it still
so that's
sounds like a little dictatorship, but it's still different
basically the
from.
government is your mom and your daddy.
So what's the difference
You
between?
depend on them
Okay,
solely.
so what is then communist? It ain't too far off from communism to me. And I know communism pretty much makes a decision and tells you that you can't do certain things because it's law.
Gaddafi had his picture up with them glasses. He'll drop him and say, "Kill everybody over there."
Stop it. Communism, a system or social organization in which all economic and social activity is controlled by a totalitarian state dominated by a single and self perpetuating political party. So it's different. It's a little different.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Well, let's get it, man. I want to see. This guy did this video. His Let me see this. I've never reviewed.
Yeah, let's
anything
get
on
this
channel.
review. Let's get this review.
Let's get this review. Let's see. On the biographics channel.
Okay. Biographics.
All right, let's get it. The Mad Dog, Muammar Gaddafi, the Mad Dog over the Middle East.
Mm.
Can you hear that?
Mm-hmm.
With them good headphones. The matching.
Thank you, honey. Want me to be like you?
Backstory on now. I'm not gonna tell it.
Why?
Kim Jong-un became
Ain't nothing to tell. I wanted a different color, but that's okay. Ain't nothing wrong with wanting a different color, honey.
Put fingernail polish on. Let's get it.
go-to tyrant for 5-star absurdity, there was another dictator on the block. Muammar al-Gaddafi ruled Libya for 42 years with an iron fist wrapped in a sequined glove so garish it would put Liberace to shame.
Whoa.
His flamboyant reign was famous for its absurdity. For every headline relating to his terrorist activities, there were maybe a dozen more about his plastic surgery addiction or his all-female bodyguard troop. By the time Gaddafi was overthrown...
Who are they talking about now? Are you talking about, who are you talking about? Did you say, who are they talking about? Versace,
all female bodyguard. Okay, let's go.
Gaddafi had it like that?
Gaddafi.
He had a bunch of plastic surgeries and he got the women guarding with, they naked with AKs.
Let's see, boo-boo.
2011, he was less feared than he was simply mocked. But behind the monstrous vanity lay a man who was simply a monster. Rape in Gaddafi's Libya, it was institutionalized. Mass executions were broadcast on TV.
Whoa.
Dissidents were executed and their bodies were kept in freezers for the self-styled king of all kings to visit at his leisure.
Wow.
With such depraved behavior, it wasn't created in a vacuum. It was only thanks to Libya's tortured history that Gaddafi was able to imprint his psychosis on his nation. Today on Biographics, we're exploring the life of the mad dog of the Middle East.
That kind of makes me think about, like, back in the day, the Philistine people, when they would kill kings, they would take them and hang them on in their temple of Dagon. They'll hang your head on in Dagon for their god, and then for other people and kings to come and see.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's crazy. That go back a long time ago. Go, you know, displaying and killing bodies and telling people to come see it.
Mm-hmm.
And kingship.
Wow.
Who was that?
It must have been him.
Most historians of Gaddafi start at the obvious place, the sweltering June day in 1942 when he was born in a nomad's tent near the dusty fishing village of Sirte. But to really understand Gaddafi, you have to go back further, all the way back to September the 28th, 1911. That's the day Italian warships appeared off the coast of Tripoli. It was the beginning of the Italian occupation and the beginning of Libya's very own reign of terror. For the next few decades, Libya was not a nice place to be anything other than a pure-blood Italian. Natives were worked to death in squalid labor camps while resistance fighters were brutally executed in public. The whole affair only ended when the Allies booted Italy from North Africa in 1943. By that point, over a third of all Libyans had been murdered by the colonizers. If Gaddafi was cruel, it's because he was born into a world where cruelty was the only currency. With British help, King Idris of Cyrenaica seized power in 1951, joining the 3 colonies of Italian Libya into modern Libya and ushering in a period of peace. Not that young Gaddafi had it easy. His family were poor Bedouins. He lived in a tent. His only formal schooling was meant to be learning the Quran. It's only because he showed promise that he was sent on to basic school. Presumably, his family hoped that he was destined for greater things. Spoiler alert. That's what we call foreshadowing. While young Gaddafi was at school, scraping his knees and carving his name into desks, Libya was sinking into a mire of poverty. King Idris was selling land to the US Army in return for cash in his family's pockets, which was as popular as you would expect with the population. While this sort of naked corruption was humiliating for ordinary Libyans, it was just...
Bruh, he was like, look here, give me 150,000, you get the whole side of the country.
I mean, I knew the guy was, I remember him being corrupt and not remember him in a good way, but I didn't realize it was like this harsh.
Right.
This is crazy.
Symptom of the broader malaise gripping the Arab world. With culture in decline and the rich looting their countries, the average Arab was looking for a champion. They were looking for someone to make them feel proud again, and this is where Nasser enters the picture. Colonel Gamal Abdel Nasser is a man who honestly could fill a dozen of these videos all by himself. The new ruler of Egypt, following a bloodless coup in 1952, he was the guy about to light the spark of Arab nationalism and send it exploding across the region. In June 1956, well, he finally did that. Furious with the British military presence in his nation and angry at the new state of Israel on his borders, he nationalized the British-owned Suez Canal. So, well, the British joined forces with France and Israel and invaded, triggering the Suez Crisis. The whole Suez Crisis is beyond our scope here, so let's just skip ahead to the ending. Israel, France, and Britain, they lost the canal. Now, the basic reason they lost the canal is pretty much because the US started yelling at them, and they basically said, "Get out now, you idiots, or you're going to set off World War III," but that is certainly not how the Arab world saw it. Overnight, Nasser became a sensation. Combined with his working-class roots, his poverty reduction programs, and his desire for Arab unity, he became a hero to millions of people. Among those newly inspired people was teenage Gaddafi. Still in school, he was watching the Suez Crisis unfold with a sort of mixture of awe and excitement that your parents probably felt watching the moon landing. As with so many others, Nasser's boldness, his ambition, it lit a fire in Gaddafi's soul. Before the Suez Crisis was over, he'd been expelled from school for political agitation. But if you think a simple expulsion is going to halt Gaddafi's new ambition to be the Libyan Nasser, well, you're in for a big surprise.
Look at that face.
Oh, no.
He had a hard face, boy.
Just the life that he's lived up into that is all in his face. Wow.
5 years after his expulsion, young Gaddafi managed to finagle his way into the military academy in Benghazi. He did this for the express reason of staging a Nasserite coup. Seriously, he even brought a loyal group of school friends along with him, all of whom donned uniform for the very first time on the understanding that they'd soon be overthrowing the government. However, this was not to happen just yet. For 8 years, Gaddafi and his co-conspirators did nothing more than slowly rise up the army ranks. Gaddafi was made a captain and he was briefly trained in the UK. He met the American ambassador, who astutely noted that the young soldier's intelligence was only matched by his extraordinary emotional instability. By 1963, Gaddafi had established a secret free officers society in the army, modeled after Nasser's old coup-planning team. By 1965, it had expanded its membership far beyond his childhood friends, becoming the army club to join. Now convinced destiny was on his side, Gaddafi simply needed a sign that Libya was ready for an uprising. And in 1967, he got it. On June the 5th, long-simmering tensions between Israel and its Arab neighbors finally reached boiling point. The resulting six-day war saw Israel wipe the floor with Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, while barely even breaking a sweat. For our story, though, it was the reaction in Libya that really mattered. Angered at such epic Arab humiliation, the populace rioted. It was the first major sign of dissent against Idris's rule. Until now, Libyans had been almost uniquely undemonstrative in the Arab world. For Gaddafi's free officers, this was the sign they'd been looking for. In August 1969, King Idris made the fateful decision to go to Turkey for medical treatment. While he was out of the country, the free officers, they quietly seized control. When Libya awoke on September the 1st, it was to a new regime. The monarchy had been toppled in a bloodless coup, and the free officers now ruled via the Revolutionary Command Council with Gaddafi at its chair. At age just 27, the Bedouin boy born in a tent became the de facto ruler of Libya. So given what we know about Gaddafi, well, how was the coup received at the time? Surprisingly, it was actually received rather well. Most Libyans, they embraced it. While Idris had been popular with his clan, most others felt his rule had been weak and pretty ineffective. And Gaddafi, he wasn't just being vain calling himself the Libyan Nasser. Ordinary Libyans really were crying out for a pan-Arab champion to restore their pride and drag them into the modern world. Even on the international scene, the reaction was mostly warm. Henry Kissinger was willing to accept Gaddafi's insistence that the US abandon its Libyan bases on the basis that the new leader was at least an anti-communist. In fact, the only group who turned out to be unhappy with the idea of a Gaddafi-led coup were the free officers themselves, who tried to stage yet another coup in December to replace Gaddafi. But they were not successful, and they were very quickly crushed. As the sun dawned on a new decade, it was on a Libya that was now totally under Gaddafi's control.
Dang. Stop, hit pause. Wow. So they tried to overthrow him, but he was like, y'all ain't putting me out.
That's how it go. If you try to overthrow and you lose, off with your head.
Oh my gosh. It was worse. How much worse could it have been?
You be anytime. But that goes in their history. That's what happened. Anytime Trump overruled, if you took over and you were successful, you killed the king, Okay, then you take over. But you don't, all y'all dead.
Whew, crucial.
The 1970s saw Libya get off to a fresh start that was, if not exactly good, then not utterly terrible. Following Nasser's lead, the now Colonel Gaddafi nationalized key assets like petroleum production, he made education free, and he distributed money to the poor. Also, like his hero, Gaddafi expelled the Jews along with all remaining descendants of the Italian colonists. It's here that we get our first glimpse of the man that Gaddafi would become. For the new Libyan leader, it wasn't enough that the Italians simply left. They had to be humiliated as well. He forced all those going into exile to dig up the corpses of their dead from the graveyards and take them with them. That very
He said, "Hey, get your mama over there. Get your dad.
Now, how cold-blooded is that?
Throw them bones over your back."
That's just completely heartless. Who would do that?
Raw. That's a mass exodus. That's
So
exile.
we know where he is right now.
That's exodus exile.
That
You hear
is
me?
horrible. So not only am I going to put you out, I'm putting your dead relatives out too.
Dig 'em up.
That's brutal.
caravan of death must have been a chilling sight. However, this was all relatively small potatoes. The outside world paid little attention to Libya. Even the Arabs didn't. That all changed on September the 28th, 1970. That was the day that a massive heart attack felled Gamal Abdel Nasser. The master, he was suddenly gone. It was a tough time for the Arab world, probably made tougher by Gaddafi's loud insistence that he was Nasser's heir and would lead them all from now on. While the Middle East mourned its hero, the Libyan upstart began pulling all sorts of tricks, from starting a war with Chad to getting thousands of Libyan youths to storm the border with Egypt, waving petitions inked in their own blood, demanding the unification of Libya and Egypt. Now, as mad as this all was, there was still a chance at this stage that Gaddafi might end up being okay. He'd made some reforms and he'd used
That boy was headed to a fashion suit. He was going the
He
runway,
looked
right?
like he was a little crooked, right? But he was stylish.
He was
Oh
looking at
my God.
drip. Look at my drip. My drip.
Ooh, look at that.
My drip.
Okay.
Full goat skin.
Got the gold rings on.
money from the
Surprising, got a gold
nationalized
teeth.
petroleum to bring clean drinking water and irrigation ditches to the nomadic populace. Yet the clues to his future madness were still there if you knew where to look. And that place was Gaddafi's Green Book. Released in 1974, the Green Book remains a work like no other. It's an explanation of Gaddafi's political philosophy. It's a heady mix of utopianism, Arab nationalism, Islamism, socialism, tribal values, and a great huge dollop of xenophobia. But it's all
Darn.
thrown together in a way that doesn't really make any sense. That may be why, when Gaddafi declared Libya the Green Book's prophesized utopian government, the Great Jamahiriya, in 1977, only Burkina Faso ever seemed enthusiastic. The rest of the Arab world simply shrugged. Well, almost. Gaddafi's Green Book prophesied that other Arab powers would be so jealous of the Jamahiriya that they would try to destroy it. So, in July of 1977, he attacked Egypt first before they could attack him. Only, it turns out, Egypt never intended to attack, but now they were in this war and they were damned if they were going to lose it. 500 dead later, the world had a very good indication that Gaddafi's Jamahiriya did not intend to play nice.
Mad dog.
Man.
Wow.
By the end of the 1970s, it was clear which way the winds were blowing. Frustrated by the end of his dreams of becoming the next Nasser, Gaddafi instead settled for becoming notorious on his own insane terms. Inside Libya, this meant a return to the repression of the Italian era, only with a weirdness that was specifically unique to Gaddafi. Cinemas,
That boy too cool. Well, I'm sorry. He wasn't a good person, but look at, I swear he was getting ready for the run, for the shoot.
Man, how can you be so cold-blooded? But my thing, okay, who elected him official? How did he even get in office? He just walked up in there and said, I'm the one.
Vote for me. Did they even have to vote?
I
I don't know the law.
I was somewhere, I don't know if I missed it in the very beginning. I'm trying to figure out, did they ever say how he got in the office?
He said, look at these glasses. Do you want free education?
Because he deboed his way into the military, so
free
maybe
money.
that's how. Maybe that's where it all started. Back in the military, is he
If I
just
take these glasses off, everybody dies.
debo his way. But how do you just
That's tough.
debo your way? That's power. We gotta dig a little deeper.
Concerts and football matches, they were all banned, followed by anywhere else where people could plot against the regime. Music was designated Western imperialism, and a great bonfire of musical instruments burned in Tripoli's central square. On the economic front, rampant corruption led to supermarkets so empty that there were frequent deadly food riots. Not that you could complain, of course, because complaining meant you would become another victim in the mass executions broadcast day and night on public TV.
Now that's
Gaddafi
tough.
may have expelled the Italian colonizers, but he kept the cruelest of their methods.
Yo,
Outside
that's a
Libya,
grenade.
this was when Gaddafi began
man.
throwing money at every extremist group on the planet. Semtex went to the IRA, weapons to the Black Panthers, and certainly money.
Say what? For real? He was just like, everybody, whoever is extreme, oh, I like that jacket. That jacket is extreme. Here go 100,000. He would just like throw bread at folks. I like that. I like how you think. Boom. I like how your group think. Boom.
Wow, let's see.
You're
That's
against
crazy.
the government? Boom.
ANC. And yes, that is the same ANC that was led by Nelson Mandela, who at that point was sitting in prison. And do remember this because it's going to be important a bit later.
Okay.
So as 1981 shuddered into view, Libya had basically gone mad. The death toll of the ongoing war in Chad was brutalizing the whole society, now also crumbling under a British-led economic embargo. It was around this time that Gaddafi first appeared on American screens when US warships were forced to shoot down 2 Libyan jets over the Gulf of Sirte. It was the first military clash between America and an Arab power in modern times. And as you already know, it was not the last. Fast becoming an international pariah, Gaddafi doubled down. In the early 1980s, he made a public speech in which he called Libyans living abroad stray dogs who would be hunted down. He also promised to bring chaos to Europe, a promise that he quickly fulfilled. Now, listen, it would take the rest of our time here today to give you a running timeline of all of Gaddafi's atrocities over the next few years. Let's just say that they were numerous and they were shocking. A highlights, or maybe a lowlights reel, might go something like this. April 1984. A submachine gun fires out of the window of the Libyan embassy in London, injuring 11 anti-Gaddafi protesters and killing 25-year-old policewoman Yvonne Fletcher.
He was just
December
fired.
1985. Arab terrorists funded by Libya launched simultaneous gun attacks on Rome and Vienna airports, killing 19 and wounding 138.
Yo.
Their targets, Jewish passengers. April 1986, Libyan intelligence bombs a West Berlin nightclub frequented by US soldiers. 2 soldiers and a Turkish civilian die, while nearly 230 are injured. Wow. Now, it was this last one that finally made the international community take action. Faced with dead American soldiers, Ronald Reagan authorized a bombing run on Tripoli intended to take out Gaddafi himself. Just days after that bomb went off in Berlin, American jets streaked across the pale blue Libyan skies, raining missiles onto the capital. In his compound, Mad Dog
remember that.
Gaddafi
I remember
was
that.
shaken to life by an enormous explosion. Staggering outside, he supposedly found the bomb crater that had been meant for him. Near that crater lay the torn and bloodied body of his adopted daughter. The American bombs may have failed in their goal of killing the dictator, but they at least seemed to shake him to his senses. The attacks on Europe faltered. In 1987, Gaddafi officially ended the war in Chad. In 1988, he even mimicked Gorbachev's perestroika reforms in the Soviet Union, allowing capitalism back into Libya, and personally standing atop a bulldozer that smashed down the wall of a jail in Tripoli, freeing hundreds of political prisoners.
So he was like, I'm good. Hey,
The U.S. is not what I want. My bad for
white flag. I'm cool.
coming over there thinking I'm gonna
Yo.
mess with y'all just an inkling.
Yo.
At the time, it looked like a cynical ploy for winning back the hearts of a population that it abused for so long. Today, though, we know that the Mad Dog was likely just playing for time. Shortly after 6 p.m. on December the 21st that year, Pan Am Flight 103 took off from Heathrow Airport.
Uh-oh.
It flew upwards over Britain until it reached the skies above the village of Lockerbie, Scotland. There, it disappeared from radar screens. When a control tower tried to signal it, only silence returned.
What?
We all know what happened. At 7:02, a Libyan bomb exploded in the hold of Pan Am 103, killing all 259 people on board.
horrible.
Flaming wreckage then crashed down into Lockerbie, killing a further 11 people. In the aftermath of the bomb,
Because you got to think back then, what year was this? What year did he say that happened?
80, was it 80 something?
Wait.
Did he say the year? I don't know. Was it 88? No, you going back too far.
I know, no. I'm just going, oh, okay, wait. 86. So that must have been in December of
He's in 88 now. I don't think it was, or even.
Oh, 92. Oh,
Yeah.
wait, did I go back too far? There it is. So let's say the 80s, because he ain't got the 92 yet. You got to think, they didn't go through the whole, TSA didn't go set up shop until it
after
was
September
11.
2011.
So, yeah.
So that was whenever
So
Reagan was in office.
think about before then, you just get on an airplane.
That's right. Remember I
just
told you,
kept
I
on the
remember when you
airplane.
could smoke on the airplane.
Yes,
I don't know where I was going, but I must have been, I don't know where I was flying to, but I remember specifically I could smell cigarette smoke. I'm thinking to myself,
Yep.
why do they let people smoke on the plane? And then shortly after that,
It was over.
yeah.
What year was that?
I don't remember.
I remember right before 9/11. I remember two things I remember in my early childhood on a plane was you walk right through. It was no issue. It was no TSA. And this man on this airplane pulled out a booger so long, and the sun was glazing through. He was like this. Everybody was looking at him. He was trying to hide it under the seat.
Stop it. For real?
We were headed to New York
Oh my gosh.
shortly after. That was on 9/11. But I know I can still remember that.
That's crazy. I gotta look that up. Go ahead.
and M103, killing all 259 people on board. Flaming wreckage then crashed down into Lockerbie, killing a further 11 people. In the aftermath of the bombing, it took an international investigation 2 years to pin the blame on Libya. By that time, Gaddafi's agents had already downed another aircraft, the French-operated UTA Flight 772, which exploded over Niger in 1989. Death toll, 170 people. In 1992, the UN instigated a harsh sanctions regime against Tripoli. This was the beginning of Gaddafi's total isolation from the world.
Mine is through isolation.
If Gaddafi had begun 1988 trying to emulate the reformist zeal of Gorbachev, he entered the 1990s an isolated madman, no longer caring about what the world thought of him. It's around this time that some of the darkest characteristics of the Mad Dog began to emerge.
Okay.
There are tales of secret, soundproof chambers built into public buildings across Tripoli. If Gaddafi happened to be visiting and saw a girl he liked, she would be slipped away and locked in these rooms until he was ready to come and rape her. Those who disappointed him, they'd be never heard from again. Those who he liked might become part of his all-female bodyguard retinue. Then there were the young boys. They were all underage and all pretty. They were kept caged beneath his compounds and became known euphemistically as the Services Group, a gang of child sex slaves the dictator could use whenever he wanted. Finally, there are the tales of the freezers.
This man
The
was
gross.
crazy. Oh
Gross.
my gosh.
Gross.
Mm.
Gross.
He was a sicko for real.
2011 revolution, a group of ice rooms were discovered below Gaddafi's palace. Inside each one lay some rival who'd been killed on the Mad Dog's orders. Some had been there for over 25 years. It's said that Gaddafi would often come down there in the night and touch their frozen corpses to be reminded again of his omnipotence. He wanted to feel the godlike power he had over life and death.
Yo.
Wow.
These tales, though, they don't even begin to scratch the surface of the regime's horrors in the 1990s. There's the day in 1996 when guards walked into the Abu Salim political prison in Tripoli, dropped grenades into the cells and killed 1,270 men, or the extreme methods used to crack down on those who began a tribal rebellion against his rule in 1990.
Wait, can you imagine somebody opening the door, boom, lock it, boom? That is pure evil.
Or the way the sanctions bit so hard that speculating in water became punishable by death. All in all, Libya in the 1990s was just as bad a horror show as it was during the Italian occupation.
Oh my
perhaps even
gosh.
greater. Yet Gaddafi still retained one unlikely friend. Remember that mention of Nelson Mandela that we talked about a few minutes ago?
Okay.
Well, now free, Mandela spent most of the 90s trying to talk his one-time sponsor into turning over the Lockerbie bombers. In 1999, the South African statesman managed to extract both the promise to do just that from Gaddafi and an apology for the murder of Yvonne Fletcher back in 1984. But it would be a world-changing event that finally brought Gaddafi in from the cold. In the aftermath of 9/11, he became the first Arab leader to offer both condolences and practical military support to the USA. Suddenly, in this crazy new war on terror era, Mad Dog Gaddafi didn't seem to be such a bad guy after all.
How?
For the relatives of Gaddafi's many victims, the noughties were like falling through the looking glass. After Libya paid reparations to the Lockerbie families, the UN lifted its sanctions. Then, in 2004, Gaddafi suddenly announced Libya was giving up all of its chemical and biological weapons. As a reward, both the George Bush and Tony Blair governments began encouraging business investment in Libya. The UK's MI6 even kidnapped the families of 2 Libyan dissidents from Bangkok and handed them over to Tripoli with a note saying thank you. This new international phase for Gaddafi was marked by him formally turning his back on the Arab world. In a public speech, he begged God to help keep the Arabs out of Libya. It seems that if he couldn't be the Nasser of the Arabs, then Gaddafi would settle for being the Nasser of another people. From the mid-2000s on, Gaddafi began laying the grounds for his final quixotic dream: a United States of Africa. This Africa would have one passport, one external border, one army, and one ruler, and you can probably guess who he thought was right for the job. Most African leaders, unsurprisingly, dismissed the Mad Dog's latest fantasy, but not all. In 2008, Gaddafi managed to convince over 200 African kings and tribal chiefs to crown him the King of Kings of all of Africa.
Wow.
It was classic Gaddafi pageantry, but it did have immediate consequences. As a show of goodwill, he threw Libya's borders open to all Africans. The result was 4.5 million Arab and Muslim Libyans resentfully being forced to share their country with 1.5 million Christian Africans. While the United States of Africa never went anywhere, the decade ended with Libya on its best international footing since 1969. In 2009, Gaddafi even managed to use his diplomatic clout to have the Lockerbie bomber freed on compassionate grounds. All in all, things were looking up for the monster of Maghreb. He was the longest-serving non-royal leader on Earth. He had friends in Europe and America. The petro money was pouring in. Gaddafi in 2010 looked unstoppable. And he might have been, were it not for an anonymous Tunisian street vendor named Mohamed Bouazizi. On December 17th, 2010, Bouazizi set himself on fire to protest his harassment by Tunisian authorities.
Wait, you protest? Your protest is to burn yourself alive? Jesus.
No, thank you.
Of his wounds a couple of weeks later, but his suicide led to large-scale protests that forced Tunisia's autocratic ruler from power. The Arab Spring, it had arrived, and it was about to hit Libya like a hurricane. You might remember what happened next. Gaddafi was so sure his people loved him that he was caught completely on the back foot when the country exploded in revolt on February 15th, 2011. Benghazi fell, and then the rest of the East. Finally, aware of what was happening, Gaddafi dropped the mask of moderation he'd worn since 9/11. The Mad Dog, he came roaring back, and he was hungry for blood. As the world watched on, the Libyan army began rolling towards Benghazi. Those inside were trapped. Fearing an impending massacre, NATO stepped in. A no-fly zone quickly turned into bombing runs against Gaddafi's units. With Western air power now on their side, the rebels broke out of Benghazi and pushed west. In no time at all, Gaddafi's forces were in retreat. The resulting civil war lasted 8 months and killed somewhere in the region of 20,000 people. In its end days, the world witnessed all of Gaddafi's worst impulses. He ordered the starvation of Misrata in a horrifying siege. His jailers tortured prisoners to death. His soldiers were given orders to rape civilians. But Gaddafi, he simply couldn't counter NATO's air power. By the end of the summer, he was hiding in Sirte, the one-time fishing village he had been born outside, which had been transformed by 4 decades of his patronage into a bustling city. On October 20th, 2011, rebel fighters finally overran its defenses. Gaddafi was found hiding in a storm drain, his flamboyant clothes soaked with blood and excrement, surrounded by rubbish and cowering like a rat. Sadly, in Libya, cruelty still remained the currency. As Gaddafi whimpered, "What's this, my sons? What are you doing?" he was surrounded by a jeering crowd. One soldier took his bayonet and sodomized the dictator with it, slicing his insides open. As phones were waved to record his last moments, gunshots rang out. The crowd panicked. The images went blurry. When they finally refocused, Gaddafi was dead. Nothing more than a bloodied corpse in the back of a truck. The first and last king of all Africa was no more. Today, some 7 years after Gaddafi's unceremonious execution, Libya is a mess of tribal conflict and deadly instability. There are at least 5 groups in control of swaths of the country, on top of countless militias. Over 10,000 people have died since the post-Gaddafi settlement collapsed in 2014, making it one of the worst wars currently raging. In the end, perhaps all Gaddafi really did was hold his country back. For a nation forged in the cruelty of the Italian occupation, the cruelty of the Gaddafi regime led only naturally to the cruelty of today's conflict. Maybe under a different leader, Libya could have been something more. As with so much in history, we will never know. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below, and don't forget to subscribe. We got...
Whoa!
Wow!
I didn't know that much was going on. That's a lot. And like Dave Chappelle said on the SNL, I mean, a lot.
That is unbelievable. I knew he was not remembered in a good light, but I didn't realize he was that heartless.
His positive compared to his negative. His positive down here, his negative was way up here.
Yeah. That is horrible. Wow.
See, that's what dictatorship, and I guess, like I said, socialism can lead to. Because you leave in the evil power, you leave in man with a wicked heart to go out and rule as he please, from selfish motives, not really caring, focusing on your country, but you got a whole selfish motive on how you go about everything. And so that's why what he was doing, what he did some positive, but you can't even see him because all the negatives he did, and then he died brutally. He died biblically.
By the own hand of his people, of course, because he was... That's why I'm like, why do they wait so long?
Fear. I'm sure fear.
Why did they wait so long to overthrow him?
Fear. See, but it depends on your country. Depends on your country. Well, I don't know. Certain countries, they're gonna pull that fire out. Sorry, not in fear, but in America, we have so many access to guns. I don't think we're a country that's fear of the government. I think that whole thing that happened in, boop, boop, a couple of years ago at the top of the year, let you know that people were not in fear of the government. And so that's why people, you really have to be mindful speaking in their motives. So
that was crazy. But I
that
mean,
the
way he died was,
terrible. Not it.
You reap what you sow.
That's what it was.
Wholeheartedly. That was horrible. But look at what he did to the people.
He did bad. And the whole thing about having the underground things, you go down there and mess with people.
Oh my gosh. But killing people and keeping their bodies. Keeping their bodies in the freezers. And just going on, just pushing his way through other countries. That's just, wow. I did not realize he was.
Me, I keep all the little girls and all the little boys down here and I touch them all. That's terrible.
Sicko. Wow. Well, he got what he deserved. That's how I feel. I know God is the one that is the judge, of course. However, he will step back and allow things to happen. But it also talks about how the things that we plant come back.
Yeah.
That's what planting those seeds.
Reaping and sowing.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, you're reaping and sowing. Yeah. Because, never mind.
Anyway.
Okay. Whoa. I didn't know it was that deep. But now I know who Gaddafi was. What you looking at?
This was when the U.S. outlawed smoking on airplanes. Shut up. On February 25th, 1990, the no smoking sign was permanently lit on U.S. domestic airline flights. So I don't remember where I was going.
I ain't flying the 90s. I did 1990. I flew in the late. I flew in.
This eventually led to smoke-free air on all flights to and from the U.S. and to smoke-free policies for airlines worldwide.
And you said something too. I'm gonna take it back. You meant 2009, 11, 2001.
When did yeah. What did I say? 2011.
You said 2011. I was like, wait a minute. We got married on the
right,
17th.
and that's what makes me think about it because I refer it. Yeah.
9/11. It was the year that we decided that we were not going to get married that day. We were going to wait till the 17th because everything happened on 11.
Right. You're right. Is that right?
So what now? We were married when they went.
September 11th.
I remember sitting. I graduated 2002, and I was sitting in the classroom when the planes were hitting. My teacher was just like, I was in high school, and they were like, we were sitting in class. The bell had rung. Nobody was getting up. Everybody was like, "Man, y'all see what's going on?" My teacher was like, "All right, man. All right, class, y'all, okay, y'all be careful." And he was just looking at the TV. And everybody, some people slept behind. They were looking like it was so much because everybody was like, "Whoa." But when you young, you ain't feeling the effects until you got home.
Mm-hmm.
And the news was going crazy.
Yeah.
And you like, and then people were starting to it was ringing in the streets after I got out of school, man. People starting to cut up a little bit.
Yeah.
What was that? What was that?
What was what?
All right. So what
was what?
Like,
land
comment,
your
subscribe.
plane. That's what that was.
Bad
land
segue.
your plane.
Bad time.
Land your plane.
All right, like, comment, subscribe. Don't take a nosedive, but comment in the section below if you want something like this and you want some more.
Yeah, this was really interesting. I truly enjoyed this. So
I
keep
did too.
us posted. Let us know. And don't forget to catch us on a live next week.
Education.
Let's go.
All right, bye-bye.